one of the things I love about where most of you are in your career is that what people can't take away from you is your experience. What people can't take away from you is your core of your character and your value. And if you feel that that is being jeopardized, the core of who you are, take inventory and say, is this a healthy place for me? So it kind of goes back to the wellness of it. Make sure that you are in the right place. And sometime, you know, and by the way, I don't tell people to run. Sometimes I tell them to fight, but you also have to figure out, is it a fair fight? And so sometimes a fair fight is moving on. I also share with people that when you think about your advancement and you're trying to go straight and you're hitting a brick wall, you have to figure out, okay, is there another way around that wall? Is it over the wall? Is it around the wall? You know, do you break the wall down? So you have to kind of assess that piece of it. Because again, we know that not all companies, you know, value the diversity that you bring to the table.
That introduces as a good segue to another question. So from your perspective, you know, why is racial equity a scary topic?
Because race in America has always been a scary topic, and that not everyone is ready to have that conversation. I will share with you, I think some people are afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing, or afraid they don't have the answer, or afraid they have done something that actually contributes to that issue. It's just something that I think many times people of color, particularly Black African-American, this is just something we talk about. This is just something that we have to face. You know, it's really kind of interesting that in many times people of color, we are typically the minority. And so we absolutely have to interact most times with the majority, but the majority doesn't necessarily always interact with us. And so they don't always know how that interaction is happening. So it becomes uncomfortable. It becomes a little bit of it is threatening in some cases as well. You know, I always kind of find it interesting when someone will say, you know, she's articulate, and you're like, oh, you must be talking about somebody Black. Like, why do you have to like use words like that? And so when people think some things are a compliment, it becomes like, well, really? That's how you want it? So it just, sometimes people aren't armed with having those conversations. And race is one in the United States has been the issue since the day that we came over here against our own wills. And so, and that still penetrates through many of societies.
And the next question, because it's another great segue, you're just helping me do this.
I'm here for you, Lynette, you know that.
So you know, you mentioned, you know, the apprehension people have talking on these topics, and some communities are used to having that discussion because of their survival, I guess, of it all. The question is, well, mutual respect is one of the keys to equity. Can you discuss how your organization fosters or will seek to foster that mutual respect in the work environment to start making that conversation a little bit easier?
Yeah. So let me say this. I work for Molson Coors, but I'm also just being really careful that I'm not representing Molson Coors right now. But I do think that the work that I've seen in this organization over the last 9 to 10 months, it has been a huge commitment from this organization, and it starts at the top, right? And so very, very specifically, our CEO has made the conversation about what is acceptable in these walls. So there are some things that we really be blunt is, I can control your behavior and your actions outside of this building. But when you come here, your behaviors, your actions, there's a line that is expected. And he has very clearly said, if that violates everything in you, your core, then you're not welcome here. So if your CEO is having those conversations, that's huge. If your CEO isn't having those conversations, you need to make that happen. Because I absolutely agree with you that is hugely important, that you have a place of respect. And I think the more you have that respect, then those other conversations about equity and equality can then kind of follow through that one. But if you come here and truly that people aren't respecting you, then it's hard to get beyond that piece of it.
So another question was, do you have any like recommendations or experiences where so there was a way to get the majority to open up and to even start the conversation?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably seeing that more now. And part of that is, in some cases, really allowing permission to have some of these conversations, like truly saying, and by the way, it could be one-on-one, it can be within a group, but really kind of allowing permission to have the conversation and be okay with having uncomfortable conversations and really try to treat it as a learning opportunity, an awareness opportunity. Listen, let's be clear. The burden sometimes is on us to have this. And you know, damn, I got to do this too. Well, yeah, probably. And so it is heavy. And so let me not pretend that it's not heavy. And then coming in being heavy outside of the workforce, and then coming in and being heavy in here, all that together can be taxing on the individual. So you hope that you have those conversations within your organization and saying, how do you take some of this burden off of me? Like, I don't want to always, I'm not the spokesperson for all Black men. I'm not the spokesperson for all Blacks. So how, as an organization, will you take some of that on, that we can deal with equity, that we deal with equality, we can deal with respect? And so some of that is making sure that you don't allow the organization to say, Lynette, you become that spokesperson for us, right? No, that's not my gig, right? You are responsible for that piece of it. So, really just, calling the company what it is and saying, I need for you to take that responsibility on, and that shouldn't carry all that. I'm willing to be an advocate. I'm willing to be a supporter of that piece of it. But ultimately, company, if you want to be that change agent, you need to own that.
Right. So talk a little bit more about that. So you're saying potentially the development of allies.
Listen,
is that fair to say?
It's funny because I know one of the people that's on this call is one of my colleagues, and I talked about allyship. Huge within your organization that truly want to advance the agenda of many within this organization. So really, and I say this, that my opportunities to grow my career, to develop myself, was because others became my champion, spoke about me when I wasn't in the room. And part of that was they got to know me, I got to know them. I shared with them what I was looking to do within my career. I was vulnerable in some cases. I didn't necessarily ask them to advocate for me, but in some cases I gave them the reason to advocate for me, right? And so you really kind of have to think of that piece of it. It is hard to do this on your own. And an advocate can be a male, a female, Black, white, really just kind of make sure, and one of the other conversations I have about this being that an ally is, as I share it with others as I have my diversity conversation, is look who's in your circle. Look who, be honest about who is in your circle. Is that circle going to be the one that checks on you? Is that circle the one that you can rely on? Is that circle the one that can be honest with you? Like, again, you were raggedy today, and let me tell you that you're raggedy. like you need to have these honest people. In some cases, we also use this term, board of directors. So who are those folks who are around you that can have these conversations that you can call and say, I'm struggling today? Who are those people that say, just give me a word, just give me a word that I can kind of feel safe around that one? So really kind of think about who's in your circle. Do you have a board of directors? And by the way, that board of directors should be diverse. Like, I have folks who are still on my board of directors that I was at the banquet 25 years ago. So don't lose pieces of all your circles shouldn't be in the same company. All your board of directors not be in the same discipline. Really make sure you diversify your board of directors so you can go to various people for various things, and those people in some cases are your allies. So just sometimes we're kind of uncomfortable going outside of our circle, and I get that. And all I say is breathe, think about it, and saying, if I want to do something within my career, if I want to grow something, who can give me that advice? And sometimes those individuals are within your circle. having said that, I also say, also surround yourself with good people in your circle. And that don't mean that you are better than anyone else, but just make some time. I have a group of 6 friends that, we can call each other, and I know they're gonna like tell me probably something I don't need to hear. So in some cases, they have also kind of be that piece there too. So really kind of balance that you have this professional circle, but then the professional side of it saying, my board of directors, who do I need to really kind of give me the pieces that I don't have?
This is really good. And you have a lot of violent agreement in the chat room today.
Good, good.
So a follow-up question, because, I noticed, that conversation about what to do in order to keep yourself, in the game, if you will, requires some friendship and network, a board of directors, as you say. But not everyone is that gregarious, right? Not everybody seems to is an extrovert who can collect up friends. Do you have any advice for those people who just aren't part of that spirit? Because part of diversity really is different kinds of people,
absolutely,
different ways of acting. So
yeah,
what about those who don't have those?
Listen, I would probably say just start small. Just go to, again, sometimes it is being uncomfortable to get to where you want to go. And it might just be someone that you say, can I just spend 5 minutes having a conversation with you? And also let them know, listen, this is not what I do. Like, this is hard for me, but I'm really interested in getting to know you better. One of the things I appreciate about most people, if I called you, Lynette, and said, Lynette, I just like to learn more about you, most folks will say, wait, I get to talk about myself? Sign me up, right? So it's not even about like you going in and you telling everything about your, like Stephen Brown. I'm not going to tell you everything on Stephen Brown. Lynette, I just kind of want to know like a little bit about your career. So I get it that, again, it is uncomfortable. And I think, the introduction that probably, I think Rosemary may have said, again, I didn't hear anything, is, listen, I didn't come from a family that spoke about that, that talked about business. I didn't come from a family that had money. I didn't come from a family that knew how to kind of move and groove with this one. I also came from a background that, I grew up with a speech impediment. And so there was always kind of concern, like if I will expose about what I can't even like pronounce or enunciate. And so that whole fear factor was there. And I'm like, yeah, but in my head, I want to do something. And so I had to kind of like, how do I develop that piece of it that I can break through those? And listen, I also had a number of people who said, what I wasn't going to be, right? Or and so, it is kind of breaking through that wall of what that fear is. And so I'm gonna get religious on you just for a moment. Because my pastor said this a couple of weeks ago, and I so appreciate it, is fear and faith, they shouldn't coexist. And so really kind of balance that. If something is holding you back, if it's fear, figure out how you can actually elevate your faith over that piece of it and walk into that space that may be uncomfortable for you, because that might be something that you might embrace once you get there. But you never know if you're going to be able to be there unless you allow yourself to actually go. The other comment I would make with this one, then I will open up the floor again with this one, is most of us are limited about what we don't know. So if we're limited about what we don't know, I just ask you to open up your door and say, how do I get to know more? And the more you get to know, then I think you get to tap into yourself of something that you never thought you had the possibility of doing. But if you already deny yourself the fear of not allowing yourself to progress, then more than likely you're not going to progress. Like, you can't have change unless there's some type of progress going on. And change is not bad. So just don't allow this voice in your head tell you what you can't do already. So if a person is, and by the way, a person who's an introvert doesn't mean that necessarily shy, but if you really are shy, just kind of figure out what works for you. Just kind of what works for you. I'm not asking you to be Stephen Brown because sometimes he bothers me, right? Sometimes you like, be your best self, like truly be your best self. And that, like, your aspiration is going to be different than my aspiration. But if you truly want to grow, then you have to be okay with saying, that means I have to probably do just a little bit something that is probably a little bit out of my comfort zone. And you might figure out that while it's outside your comfort zone, you may potentially then expand that comfort zone more than you thought you would be able to once you walk towards that phase.
This is great. This is excellent. So I think that the next question to follow is about, I guess, the group dynamic at work, being among fellow Black and Browns,
Yeah.
right? And interacting with that group, but not getting the support or being expected to have one voice. What is your advice for that scenario when you don't seem to have the camaraderie at work and you feel like you're not getting along with that community? What advice do you have?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Can you give it to me one more time?
Read it. Yeah, I kind of zipped through it. I was trying to. You caught me, Steve. I was trying.
Sorry, I'm patient.
I'll just read the question. It says,
Okay.
So I wanted to hear what can be done if Black people, for example, are not even interacting or supporting each other.
Oh,
and have
don't say that.
One voice in everything regarding DEI.
Yeah. Listen, I'm just a huge proponent that you have to figure out how to support your own, right? And it doesn't mean that you're not supporting others, but it's something about a sense of community that is hugely important. I saw someone kind of pop up with the ERG. When I joined GE Healthcare in 2004, I think I joined in June, and by July, I was part of the African American Forum. And I decided to not only then become a member, but I became one of the leaders there. And some of that was because when I looked around in meetings, I was the only person of color. And then when I went to, doing this, I was the only one. And I'm like, I can't, this is hard enough when you're doing it alone. How do you bring people around? So I think that for me, the ERG has been, and in fact, I will share with you that my involvement with the ERG is actually what led me to pivot from being an HR manager to a D&I practitioner, because it was that piece of, and again, this wasn't part of my blueprint of what I wanted to do, but I just kind of felt pulled into it. So I do think if you can find that community within the community, because sometimes that becomes a safe zone. It also allows you to have a collective voice as you try to make that change.
Really quickly,
as well.
For those of us not at
I'm sorry.
Coors, what is an ERG?
So ERG, it's called a couple of things. The ERG is Employee Resource Group. Sometimes there's different I think different levels of it. So at GE, we would call it Affinity Network, is Employee Resource Group, but there also sometimes are called a BRG, which is Business Resource Group. And essentially it is sometimes it is not only about the community that you are naturally part of, but you might have one that is tied to disabilities. There's one that's tied to race, and one that's tied to sexual identification. So it becomes those communities that you can relate with. Ideally, what you also want to do is not only have this community, but also how you make that community relevant to the business. And the more that you can say, this is how we recruit technology people within the organization. Use the Black ERG to go out to colleges or go out to conferences to bring talent within the organization. So it's building a community that exists within your organization, but also helping the business help you bring talent to also build that further community.
There's so many questions, and
good. I love it.
Ooh, okay, so now let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit about COVID. It seems like that's putting a kind of a wrench in the game a little bit. Are diversity and inclusion at severe risk when it's every person for themselves in the midst of COVID and remote business? What are your thoughts?
I hope not. I have to tell you, here the work that we do within D&I with COVID actually has elevated what we are doing here. And I mean that for a couple of reasons. One, as we know, COVID is hitting many of the Black and Brown communities at a higher rate than the majority. So, and really in many cases, it has really elevated our sense of this well-being. And also the other step that kind of we're looking at right now is as we head out of COVID, one of the ways that we head out is vaccine. Well, that is also an issue within communities, particularly Black communities, of that trust. So we have a history in regards to, is the vaccine really helping our community, or will it damage our community? So in many ways, the role that D&I is playing with helping with the education, not saying you should take this vaccine, but helping the organization understand how you need to approach this with communities that have concern and hesitation about the future with this one. So in many ways, it actually has elevated because it's a conversation that is impacting not only workers, but the community. And in my role, it is not just internal, but it's external that we look at in regards to inclusion and equity.
And that's a lot to deal with too, because you can imagine with marginalized communities being disproportionately impacted, would that fuel some of the I guess the backlash at work, or some kind of the snide comments and stuff like that? I mean, you guys dealing with that? And
I go back, 2020 was hard, right? So you have the political scene, then you had the pandemic, and then you bring those conversations in, and now you have this whole vaccine, and people have opinions associated with that one, and it's heavy, and people are talking about it, and there's a difference of opinion, and so. But the key piece there that we have really stressed is that you can have a dialogue and be respectful. And that goes back to kind of the other conversation. And we encourage the dialogue because there's some learning that can happen with that one, but you really make sure that you create a safe space for that. And the ultimate line is, how do you have these conversations in a respectful way? You and I can disagree, but let's disagree in a respectful way. That becomes our agreement. And if you're not interested in that agreement, then our interaction is going to be limited, because without the respect, it's going to be limited in regards to how we're going to interact with one another. Excellent.
Okay, a few more.
Okay.
Questions about bias and its pronouncement in a remote workforce. Are biases more pronounced? And are there some good practices to address that when you're working remotely?
That's a good one. I think, again, I go back to what are those biases? So there's one, I'm not sure if it's racial biases or, because there's a whole lot associated with biases. And first of all, they're real. All of us have them, right? So let's acknowledge that piece of it, but really kind of calling out what those are about. And I don't know if it's because of a person is limited to what they know, or they're limited to what they want to know, right? But whatever that bias is, some of this is courage, and it's tough. Like, let me be clear, the things I'm talking about, it's not easy to have these conversations, but it is hard to make change unless you truly will face those pieces of it. And sometimes it's about this education. So biases are real, they're conscious, they're unconscious. They can do a whole lot of factors associated with it. I think some people will say, oh, he or she is working from home, so are they really working hard, right? And so they start kind of thinking about, they associate this then like we're a little bit lazy if we aren't on something. Like, hold on, let me call you on that piece of it. So it is really kind of being clear about what is being either said or not said, and then having the courage to have those dialogues. And again, I go back. They're not easy to have those conversations, but you're not going to be able to face them unless you have those conversations.
Right, and we're all working for the same company, so we're all on the same team.
Right, and some of us work hard in different ways. So if the belief is you're not working as hard because you're working from home, or that you're not doing your fair share from home, one, take an inventory of yourself, saying, am I? And then if you are, then you go ahead and you face it, saying, let's have this conversation. It feels like you have a problem with the way that I'm doing X. feel like to talk about it.
Right. That's
And
fantastic.
having that piece of it.
Well, we're at 6:53 and you
I just got
did
started on the next
gangbusters. This was excellent. And, I think we could have this conversation for another 2 or 3 hours. And I'm sure all of us at home have probably had some one-on-one conversations with friends talking about a lot of these issues. And I think you've helped iron out some, questions. There was one question I didn't get to, and I wanted to just get your I kind of probably know what you're going to say. Maybe a lot of us do on the call, but I'll give you the chance to respond. But it says, what about changing a name? Let's see. Something about, how do you feel about altering an ethnic origin birth name for opportunities? I am African American and find oftentimes the differences in response to my application simply by changing my name. Your thoughts?
So here's my thought with that. You do what's right for you, but if your name is one thing and you're going to get hired on something that isn't your name, is that really? I mean, listen, I ain't telling nobody not to work. But if you have to change your name in order to work there, you have to kind of figure out, is that really where you want to work? So if that works for you, then it works for me. But ultimately, I think you need to kind of think about that. I will say, now, because it can actually play both sides. Sometimes, I actually just had this conversation, and so no one repeat what I'm about to say. I just had this conversation with someone saying that recruiters will sometimes, because so many companies are actually looking for diverse talent, they're looking for, they're trying to kind of identify, if her name is this, maybe that person is a person of color. And so in some cases, actually, where it used to be a negative, actually is now, some cases, an opportunity for employers to say, how do I get more diversity in my organization? Sometimes look by name. That bothers me because I'm not sure, if that's the best way at all. But my fundamental piece there is you do what's right for you. And if you feel like you need to alter your name to get there, that works for you. My sister and I kind of joke with one another because my mother kind of gave me the name Steven, and her name is not. She's like, why did I get lucky to have a name that, like Allah? And I'm like, because she liked me better. But ultimately, it's about what makes you feel right. But I would say be your authentic self. And if they won't hire you because your name is different, then is that where you want to be anyway?
Fantastic. Okay, we're at 4 minutes. So thank you so much. We're gonna thank you for all the Q&A out there, guys. It looks like we're gonna have to have another one of these in the future. Thank you so much for your support. Jimmy, I saw your hand was raised. Maybe we can get some contact information, or we can, if that's okay, Steve, we can maybe send some questions to you via email.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any questions you send, I will respond via Rosemary. Listen, I appreciate this opportunity. I know one thing that Albert talked about earlier is the relationship they have with the students. I'm a graduate of Washington High School, and they have a technology program there. I'm still very active with my high school. I had to plug my high school. So the things that this organization does, I so appreciate it. And the work that you continue to do with Milwaukee Public School. I'm a Milwaukee Public School grad, but Washington High School is where I came through. So thank you for the work that this organization is doing. And I see Joe Kamak out there, and Mrs. Terry out there. So they all know I'm a pergola for life.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a shout out to Brookfield Central in the house. Right? Brookfield? No? Just me? Okay.
Wah, wah, wah.
Whatever. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to continue on with our presentation, everyone. Let's see if I can get our screen up. And the last bit that we have, thank you once again, everybody, for all of your Q&A. We really knocked it out of the park today. I didn't even have to use my handy dandy screen to get to it. But the final thing that we have on our agenda this evening is our closing remarks, and that'd be with Mr. Fred Reed. Fred?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. Fred Reed here. Have been a member of the BDPA Milwaukee executive team for the last 5 years. Throughout the period, it has been a pleasure to see New students come on board, and some with basic working knowledge of computer technology and some with none. However, through the hard work and dedication and attention that they receive from Mr. Albert and the team instructors, Mr. Matt, Mr. Scott, Mr. Chop, Mr. Jimmy, Miss Kathy, the students benefit greatly. I want to thank Miss Rosemary, our president, for his excellent choice in selecting Mr. Stephen Brown, who so eloquently delivered a presentation worthy of copious note-taking. You should bear in mind that the buzzwords of phrases here, I'll recap: diverse circle, someone to confide in, know where you are in your job, know what your boss expects, be ready to change, and overcoming obstacles. Lastly, I would like to quote two important figures in our lifetime. That is the words of Dr. George Washington Carver: where there is no vision, there is no hope. So I say to that, our BDPA staff strives to serve the vision of the world technology and show the students their place in it. And Magic Johnson's saying is, all kids need a little help, a little hope, and somebody who believes in them. Our staff, our BDPA staff, believes in our children. That is why we volunteer our time, giving 100% of our effort. Thank you very much for a very encouraging, uplifting, dynamic presentation, Mr. Stephen Brown.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fred. Okay, everyone, that concludes our evening. It looks like we are right on time. Once again, special thanks to our sponsors, Northwestern Mutual, Molson Coors, Beverage Company, and BDPA, and of course, Mr. Stephen Brown. Thank you so much. I pray that we get a chance to do this again in the future. And if you have questions or any type of comments that you'd like to share with our group, you can feel free to send that information to Rosemary Smith. Her contact information is in the invite for today. And once again, we appreciate everyone sharing their evening with us. BDPA Milwaukee.
Thank you, Lynette. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Hope all is well. Enjoy your evening.